This evening, Michael considered one of the best in his life. He sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by colleagues who eagerly laughed at every one of his jokes. In one hand, he held a glass of expensive whiskey, and under the other rested his young lover, his secretary, Samantha. The entire restaurant had been rented out exclusively for this corporate celebration. Soft music played in the background, colorful string lights shimmered, and the tables were overloaded with gourmet dishes. Everything around screamed of his success and power. Samantha, his secretary and secret mistress, leaned into him, her body pressed close. She cast Michael's sultry glances and laughed a little too loudly, just enough for everyone to see whose woman she was. In her short, glittering mini skirt and deliberately provocative manner, Michael saw only a reflection of his own strength. That's what kind of man I am, he thought smugly. I can afford a young beauty, while my wife sits at home in her robe. One of his colleagues, smirking, nodded toward Samantha. So, Mike, doesn't your wife ever get jealous? Wife? Michael snorted, took a deep sip of whiskey, and smirked with disdain. What can she do? My little country Scarecrow sits home with the kids. Let her stay there. That's where she belongs. The table burst into laughter. Even those who felt uncomfortable laughed out of politeness. The doors opened almost the same way as last time. Helen walked in, wearing a simple but elegant dress, light makeup, her hair neatly tied back. Not showy, confident. Behind her was David, but he went straight to another table, apparently for work. Michael stood up. Colleagues exchanged glances, déjà vu. But this time, he didn't smile or say anything loud. He walked over quietly and said, "I'm glad you came." "So am I," she replied. "We need to finish our conversation." They moved to a small table off to the side. Helen took a familiar envelope from her bag and placed it between them. "You know what this is," she said. "I'm not playing anymore. I'm tired of games." Michael swallowed hard. "I understand, but let me speak." She nodded. "I destroyed what we had, with jokes, cheating, indifference. I lost respect for you and for myself. I'm not asking for forgiveness just to look good. I want to change what's left if you'll give me a chance." Helen looked at him closely. There was no pity in her eyes, only clear judgment. "You've changed," she said, "but I don't have to take your word for it." She opened the envelope, pulled out the papers, and pushed them toward him. "I'm leaving the choice to you. If you sign them now, we're done. If you don't, I'll wait for action, not words." At that moment, two colleagues approached their table, saw the papers, and froze. Michael realized everything was happening again in front of everyone. Only this time, it was the opposite scene. He picked up the pen. His heart was pounding so hard his fingers shook. He looked down at the lines. Application for divorce. He lifted his gaze. Helen waited calmly. "I won't sign," he said firmly. "Not because I'm afraid, but because I want to prove it with actions." He placed the pen on the table and pushed the papers back. The colleagues exchanged glances and quietly stepped away. Helen sighed. "All right, let it be so. But remember, one chance. There won't be another." "I understand," he said. "If I fail, I'll sign it myself." She nodded, stood up. "Then I'll see you at home." And she walked off toward David to discuss their project. Michael returned to his table. His colleagues looked at him differently now, some with respect, some in silence, but the air felt charged. For the first time in years, he wasn't hiding and wasn't acting. Samantha glanced at him briefly and turned away. Alex, passing by, muttered quietly, "Good luck, man." Michael lifted his glass of water. Inside, there wasn't relief, but a sense of responsibility, heavier than all the laughter at the table. That night back home, he walked into the apartment. The same envelope lay on the table. Helen had left it open. The papers were inside. He picked them up, flipped through them, then placed them back carefully, and wrote on the cover with a pen, "I won't sign." In the bedroom, Helen was already asleep. He lay down beside her, not touching, just listening to her breathing. He understood the road ahead would be long, and if he failed, that envelope would be signed, not by her, but by him. A year passed. Michael truly changed. No more harsh words. He took care of the kids, brought them to classes, cleaned the apartment himself. At work, he stopped treating every day like a performance and learned to stay silent when there was nothing worth saying. His colleagues began to respect him again, not for jokes, but for reliability. But Helen never came back. She finalized the divorce quietly. No arguments, no extra words. She just came one day and said, "Thank you for trying, but I think that's enough." And she signed the papers. So, did he? Now they had new lives, shared custody of the kids, short messages about homework and after-school clubs, rare conversations, without blame, without the past. Helen grew her business, opened a second center, spoke at conferences. She seemed to have spread her wings, and there was no stopping that flight. Michael remained alone, not broken, not defeated, just different. He realized that sometimes it really is too late, and no amount of effort can bring back what's lost. But even that had its truth. He had learned to be a father, a man without a mask. Sometimes he saw Helen at school events. They greeted each other, talked about the kids, and every time he noticed something he'd never seen before, the calm of a woman who had chosen herself. He never called her a scarecrow again, and no longer had the right to. She heard in his voice not care, but the fear of losing control. Things were changing at the office, too. Colleagues no longer feared him, and no longer respected him. During meetings, no one laughed at his sharp remarks anymore. Alex, the young assistant who used to run errands for him, now led projects confidently, and management noticed. Sevastianov had started handling key meetings without him. In the smoking area, he overheard someone say, "He used to be a king, and now it's like he doesn't exist." Those words hit harder than any formal reprimand. Samantha no longer sought him out. He saw her a few times in the hallway. A brief nod, a businesslike glance, no hint of the past. It was as if she had deleted him, one unnecessary line from a report. At first, that stung. Then it hurt. Then it became empty. He realized that what he had with her was never love, just an illusion of power. And when the illusion fell apart, there was nothing left behind. On Friday, Helen brought the kids over. They immediately ran to their rooms. She stayed in the kitchen. "How was your week?" she asked calmly. "Fine. Working. Spent time with the kids. Cleaned the apartment." "Good." She nodded. "I saw your message in the chat. Thanks for taking them to their activities." The words were meant as praise. But to Michael, they sounded like she was talking to a neighbor. "I'll be honest," he said, losing patience. "Are you and David together?" "No," Helen answered firmly. "I have work, and my personal life is none of your business." That broke him. "So now you live for him, dress up for him, build projects for him, and what am I?" Helen stood up. "You just answer your own question. Asterisk, what am I? Asterisk, you lost that right when you made me a joke in front of everyone. I'm trying to make things right," he shouted. "Making things right," she said quietly, "isn't about jealousy or checking up on me. It's about actions." She picked up her bag. "See you Sunday." The door closed. Michael stayed in the kitchen, feeling that her last words, making things right and actions, would echo in his head all night. On Saturday, he took the kids to the park. The younger one laughed on the swings. The older rode her bike beside him. "Dad," she said suddenly, "are you and Mom getting divorced?" He froze. "Why do you think that?" "Because you're always angry," she said quietly, "and Mom's calm. When people are that different, they usually don't stay together." Michael felt his heart tighten from his daughter's mouth. It didn't sound like a threat, just a fact. "We're trying," he whispered. "Really?" She nodded without looking at him, and that hurt worse than any tears. The year was ending. The company was celebrating its success. Same restaurant, same kind of hall, but for Michael, the atmosphere was completely different. He went there without joy, like a man walking into an exam. In his head was one thought: last time I made a fool of myself. Tonight I'll either fix it or break completely. Colleagues greeted him politely, but without warmth. Samantha sat at another table, talking business with Alex. "Take a seat," said Sevastyanov, waving. Michael sat down and poured himself water. Alcohol was too dangerous. He listened to the toasts and stayed silent. Silence had become his new weapon. When the music started, everyone went to dance. Michael stayed seated, watching the others. He realized he used to be the first to jump in, the loudest, the one with his arms around everyone. Now he was just an observer. His phone buzzed. A message from Helen. "I'm coming." His heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how she would appear, as his wife or as his judge. Her voice sounded as if those words were about more than just work. That evening, Michael cleaned the apartment, wiped the stove, did the dishes, even dusted the shelves. Not for her, but because for the first time he noticed the chaos around him. Then he took a notebook and honestly wrote 3 columns. What I did, what I didn't do, what I can do. In the first, humiliated, cheated, didn't listen. In the second, didn't thank, didn't ask. In the third, block Samantha, suggest therapy, take the kids a weekend. His hand trembled when he added one more line. Apologize publicly. On Monday, Helen came without the kids. Simple jeans, a sweater, her hair tied up. She sat down calmly. "I won't live where I'm humiliated," she said. "That's not emotion, that's a fact." Michael nodded. "I was wrong. It's over with Samantha. I'm ready for therapy, ready to apologize to you and to everyone who heard me." Helen looked at him carefully. "Flowers would have been easier," she said quietly. She took out a white envelope and placed it on the table. "These are the divorce papers. It's not a threat, it's insurance. If everything stays the same, I'll sign." Michael didn't touch the envelope. "Thank you for being honest," he said. "This week, the kids are with me. On the weekend, they're yours." She stood up. "Let's see how you'll manage." On Saturday, Michael threw a pizza party for the kids. Cheese flew across the kitchen. Dough stuck to their hands. The pizza turned out terrible, but delicious. The kids laughed. He laughed with them. That night, after they fell asleep, he snapped a photo of a burnt slice and sent it to Helen. "We're alive. Covered in cheese, though." Her reply came instantly. "That's exactly how it should be." On Monday morning, during the team meeting, Michael raised his hand. "I have a short announcement," he said. "At the corporate party, I made humiliating remarks about my wife. That was wrong. I apologize to everyone who heard them." The room went silent. Then someone clapped once. Sevastyanov nodded. "Let's get back to work." Michael exhaled. He knew this was only the beginning. But for the first time in years, his words weren't a mask. After his talk with Helen, and that envelope on the table. Something sharp stuck in his chest. He started doing small things, cleaning, cooking for the kids, shopping by himself. But one question kept circling in his mind. Who was David to her? He knew it was business, yet the image haunted him. Her in that elegant dress. Him, tall, confident, composed. The calm look on his wife's face beside another man hurt worse than any flirtation. One evening, he drove to the building where Helen had a meeting. He sat in the car, waiting. His heart pounded when he saw them come out together, talking. David held the door open for her. No hugs, nothing inappropriate. But Michael felt his insides burning. He called her immediately. "Where are you?" "At a meeting, just finishing," she replied. "With who?" "With David," Helen said calmly. He wanted to say, "I don't believe you," or "Don't you dare." But he stayed silent. No one dared to laugh. "Helen's project is serious," muttered the young analyst, Alex, uncertainly. "Yeah, nonsense," grumbled Michael. "Just some papers." But no one laughed, not even Samantha. She sat silently, staring off to the side. For the first time, Michael realized that his jokes no longer worked. 20 minutes later, Helen walked up to their table. David stayed behind, speaking on the phone. "Michael, can I talk to you for a minute?" she said quietly. He stood up obediently, and they stepped aside near a column. "I'm not going to make a scene," Helen said softly, "but don't you ever call me a scarecrow again." "Helen, it was just a joke, a corporate thing," he mumbled. "I heard," she interrupted. "And not just me." He lowered his eyes. "All right, I'm sorry. We'll talk at home." "We will," she said calmly. "But one thing's already clear. I won't let you treat me that way anymore." And she walked away. Michael returned to the table, but the celebration was over. No one looked him in the eye. Samantha nervously scrolled through her phone. Colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. He sat staring into his glass, and for the first time in years, he felt not triumph, but shame and fear. The wife he had always seen as a faceless housewife turned out to be a woman with strength, one he could no longer control. And for the first time, a thought crossed his mind. What if I lose her? Michael woke up before the alarm. The apartment was too quiet. No children's laughter, no sound from the kitchen. A note was stuck to the fridge. "Water for the coffee machine is running low. Please refill." He had never noticed such notes before. Today, it felt like a verdict. Her care existed even without him. His phone blinked. A message from Samantha. "How are you?" He typed busy and tossed the phone aside. No explanations, not to her, not to himself. At the office, the familiar smell of coffee and the hum of printers greeted him. But his co-workers looked at him differently, some with curiosity, others with mockery. During the meeting, he stumbled over terms. Alex whispered hints. The client frowned. Sebastianov smoothly picked up and finished the presentation. Michael felt his old pride, his ability to hold the room, slipping away. After the meeting, the boss pulled him aside. "You're off your game. Alex will lead the next meetings. And one more thing, HR wants to talk to you. There are rumors about the corporate party." Michael nodded. It sounded like a sentence. Samantha came into his office herself. No smiles, no sweetness. A folder in her hands, eyes cold. "I'm transferring to another department," she said. "It'll be better for everyone." "Because of," he began. "Because of everything," she replied evenly. "I don't want to be part of office gossip. And honestly, this should have ended long ago." She turned and walked out. Michael was left with emptiness and a strange sense of relief, as if he had finally taken off shoes that had been hurting for too long. Meanwhile, Helen stood in an empty space. The Future Children's Center. Bare walls, gray floor, the smell of dust. She spoke to the landlord confidently, calmly, but with such quiet strength that it was hard to argue with her. David stood nearby, checking the budget, clarifying technical details. After the meeting, they had coffee together. David said, "You're easy to work with. You know what you want." "Not always," she smiled, "but I definitely know what I don't want." Samantha scoffed and wrapped her arm around his shoulder. Michael smiled broadly. He loved these moments, when his word was law, and his jokes were a reason for everyone's laughter. He was always sure that things were exactly the same at home. He never thought seriously about his wife, Helen. Once, she had been different, lively, intelligent, energetic, a law student, later a lawyer at a respectable firm. But after the children were born, she seemed to dissolve into everyday life. Now her world was the kitchen, laundry, kids' clubs, and school events. For Michael, she had become something like a familiar piece of furniture, comfortable, unnoticeable, and most importantly, something that would never go anywhere. Who would want her? 2 kids, no career, just maternity leave behind her. "There are thousands like her," he used to say, confident that his wife would never leave. The evening went on. Michael managed to tell a couple of spicy jokes, raise a toast to the company's success, and throw in another jab about housewives. "You're all complaining about yours, but at my place, I've got a free maid, cook, and nanny all in one, my little Scarecrow from the country." Laughter rolled across the table again. Samantha tilted her head back, laughing loudly, and kissed him on the cheek. Michael felt like the master of the world. But that was the very moment something happened that he never expected. The restaurant door swung open, and a couple entered. Down the steps came a tall, confident woman in an elegant dark dress that perfectly highlighted her figure. Her hair was neatly pinned up, and her posture was flawless. She carried a folder of documents in her hands. Beside her walked a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s, dressed in an expensive suit. They were speaking quietly to each other. At first, Michael couldn't believe his eyes. But when the woman lifted her gaze, his heart dropped. It was Helen, his wife. The laughter at the table died instantly. One by one, his colleagues turned their heads. Samantha squinted and whispered with a poisonous smile, "Well, looks like your Scarecrow showed up." Michael felt his ears burning. He didn't know what to say. Helen and her companion, David, took a table in the corner. Documents, a tablet, and a notebook appeared on the table. They were deeply engaged in conversation. It was a business meeting. Helen looked like a completely different person, not the woman he had left that morning in sweatpants, but someone else entirely, confident, composed, and beautiful. Michael stood up and walked over to their table. Helen looked up at him calmly, without a trace of embarrassment or anger. "Good evening, Michael. This is David Parker, my project partner. We're discussing the details." "Project," he muttered. "The one I told you about," she said evenly. "Legal support for a network of children's centers. We're opening new branches." A vague memory surfaced in Michael's mind. She had really mentioned something about it, while he had been scrolling mindlessly through his phone. He had just nodded and not listened. "We'll be done in 20 minutes, she added. "If you're still here, I'll come over." And she lowered her gaze back to papers. Michael felt like he had been pushed aside from his own life. When he returned to his table, an awkward silence hung in the air. His colleagues pretended to be busy. Some scrolled through their phones. Others poured themselves water.